willing to do this? Am I willing to go through this process? And that, we get our first step again summed up once more. Mark at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first string. My defense must come from this power greater than myself. And it's that first step experience. And then sober, currently, we took a look at all the manifestations of the spiritual malady that we talked about last night, the trouble in personal relationships, the one with yourself, the one with all other people. Move out from the circle, right? Can't control my emotional natures, prey to misery and depression, full of fear, feel useless, unhappy, can't seem to be of help to others. Where are you currently with all of that? And that becomes a manifestation of the extent to which your ego is reconstructed and you're once again up against self-will. You're once again into self-reliance, coming to meetings telling people how much you believe in God, and then walking out of the meeting and going through the course of your day full of fear. That becomes the whole essence of the first step. It takes you to a point of lack of power, becomes my dilemma. Is that true? Is that the truth in my life? Do I want to do something about that? There's a spiritual law I missed for a long time in AA. Here's what it is. God will not do for me what I'm supposed to do for myself. When I get done with my first step experience, I've got to make a choice. I've got to make a decision. Am I willing to go on with this? Do I want to go on with this? Do I want this to change? And my experience is God won't interfere with that decision. So in the second step, what I'm opened up to, but if you have some time, for me, there's a different way that I'll come at the second step. Because there's really two propositions in the second step. Do I believe, or do I now believe there's a power greater than myself? And if you've been around for a while, I like to add to that can take me past here. Past my memories, past my concepts, past my ideas, even my concept of God. Is there more past here that I know nothing about? Are there experiences with God, with this power, that are beyond anything I could comprehend? Are there dimensions of love and joy and wonder and usefulness and service, freedoms from fear that I know nothing about? Am I willing to go for that? What is my answer to that? See, and my answer must be yes, otherwise God is limited. Joe made, I think, a great observation, and it's my experience. One of my greatest barriers to experiencing God is what I believe about in my memories of my past experiences with God. You see? Because here's the truth. As I breathe in this moment, I've never experienced God in this moment. Therefore, I know nothing about it and my attachment to any of that. So am I willing to let go of that? Am I willing to let go of my current concept about God? Joe talks about this. We got to stop putting God in these little boxes. See? God is so far beyond the mind. To experience God, I must be out of my mind. But my second step becomes that question. Do I believe now, or am I willing to believe there's a power greater than myself? Yes. And then there becomes another component of that. Faced with a self-imposed crisis, lack of power. Self-imposed. Don't you hate that? Self-imposed. The extent to which you're relying on self is the extent to which you are faced with a self-imposed crisis. Don Coyes talks about when you come into AA and this self-imposed crisis, he likes to use the example of you're like a little field mouse going through a field versus when you get to steps 10 and 11, you can see the world through the eyes of an eagle. How do you want to view it? How do you want to experience your world? See? So faced with a self-imposed crisis, I got to make a choice. God is either everything or God is nothing. What is my choice to be? There's a choice in the second step, a decision in the third step, and a course of action. That's the last choice we have to make through the process of the steps. And it is it's a very important choice because it's going to lead you into something we're going to look at in the third step. And here's what it is. Your life is not your business. And we really forget about that. And I forget about that. And you know why I know I forget about that? Because God decides that I'm going to get moved over here, and then I get moved over here, and I whine about it. But think about what you're saying to this power in the third step. I offer myself to thee to build with me, and you do with me as you want. And then the power does that, and we get upset. A job's taken away, a relationship ends, physical health problem, who knows? And then we get upset about that. I don't get so upset anymore, because when I made my life my business, it didn't turn out well. It just didn't turn out well. I appreciate God for giving me the opportunity to do that. It just didn't pan out very well when I made my life my business. So, but that's some of the things that you look at, all based on the first step consideration. So we're gonna talk. I'll turn this back over to Joe. Then I'm gonna come back and say a few more things about the second step. I don't know how many of you really spend time in that chapter, We Agnostics. I have read and studied, just in the last 10 years, I can't tell you how many books from many religions, many practices, many theories. And I'll say this, We Agnostics is probably one of the most profound words, chapters that I have ever read in my entire life. It is so profound. Any book I've ever read, from the Bible to the Bhagavad Gita, any book, is all encapsulated in We Agnostics. It is such an incredible, profound chapter to keep us open-minded about God. It is so simplistic in its nature. Come up with your own concept. You don't have to believe mine. It is such a great entree to having an experience with this incredible power of God.
Entree. A lot of people will hear this prayer that we encourage people to use in their own way and in their own words. They've given it a name. Some places, set aside prayer, lay aside prayer. It's not in the book. Or is it? There are several references. Page 42, paragraph 3 says it meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. Page 46 says we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, even again, and express a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. Even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. You don't have to define it, and you'll probably never be able to comprehend it, but you will be able to experience it.
Probably.
Don't let any, page 47, don't let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Page 49, we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. Page 58, some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. If you can let go of your old ideas on your own and you don't need to pray, then don't use the prayer. Just let go of your old ideas. My hunch is if anyone in this room could let go of their old ideas, they wouldn't be here today. We'd be coming to see you at your church or your ashram. Page 42. So there are several references to getting past our own ideas, past our own beliefs. That can be as relevant to the person doing the work for the first time, and as relevant if you're doing the work for the umpteenth time. The trap of knowledge. Mark talks about that a lot. The trap of knowledge. What I think I know. You can't get past here if you stick to what you already know, because every question you'll already have an answer. So I come to this work with an open mind. Maybe some of the simplest first step questions will reach me in a place that I did never consider the last time or the first time, or the questions will meet you where you are. I've met a lot of people, and myself included, for a long time in this program who do not realize that this book addresses people who suffer from lack of power. And after you've taken certain actions, it begins to talk to you as if power has come into your life. You'll notice a major shift when we get to it after the fifth step. They actually ask you to start to trust the very mind that they said would take you back to the next drink. I feel sorry for anybody with any period of sobriety who still thinks their mind is a dangerous neighborhood and a scary place to go in by yourself. You're going to have to go in there by yourself with God to heal that mind. I don't even like the idea. My sponsor told me, forget the word restore in the second step. We're going to assume you went insane about 2 seconds after you were born. You need a new mind. Believe it or not, I do not want to be restored to where I was. Where I was insane. I've heard people say, God gave me my life back. Sorry, I don't want my life back. I want a new life and a new mind. A sane mind. The best definition of alcoholic insanity that I have ever heard still comes from our big book. And it's on page 37. And it gives me a precise definition for insanity. Lack of proportion and the ability to think straight. Now, if you're alcoholic and you don't understand lack of proportion, I feel sorry for you. Lack of proportion is very simple. If one's good, 10 is better. The more, the merrier, right? Kinda, sorta, maybe, a little, don't even come into our vocabulary. That's enough? No one in this room has ever said that's enough of anything on their own without God or some balance in their life. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, they don't even tell you that the definition of insanity is important. We call this plain insanity. What? Having knowledge about himself as an alcoholic? Everyone in this room to some degree has knowledge that they're alcoholic. That knowledge will one day not be enough of a defense. You've all heard it. Think the drink through. Sorry, I'm the kind of guy, if I think it through, I just go, well, screw it. That's the way it's going to end up, right? Remember your last drunk. What about you men and women in this room that can't remember the last 4 months of your drinking? You're in big trouble. I don't remember my last drunk. I often heard my friend Bob Olson from Denver, who always says, if remembering the pain of the last drunk was sufficient, if that theory was true, then every woman in this room who's ever had a baby, the pain of your last childbirth would be enough to keep you from ever getting pregnant again. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea. He even knew that it was foolish, that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Lack of proportion, of the ability to think straight. How could it be called anything else? What about the ability to think straight? Thinking straight would be like, I'm at point A, I would like to get to point B, and something happens in between where I end off in the Michigan State Penitentiary, 19 years old, from the kind of family that I came from, and that was pretty shocking to them. Nothing I ever thought could ever happen in my life to heal the pain of talking with my mother through a plate glass window on a phone in the Michigan State Penitentiary. She came from a family, the biggest thing that ever happened was one person got divorced once. And there's her 19-year-old son sitting across from her with a plate glass window. Now, did I want to end up in the Michigan State Penitentiary when I was 19 years old? Did I plan that when I was at point A? No. It wasn't in the plan. A guy, after a few years, I was 5 years sober in Denver, 10 years in Santa Monica. During those 10 years in Santa Monica, a guy from my home group in Denver moved to LA. Of course, I got to go right to him to go through the steps because he's more qualified than anybody in Los Angeles. It was crazy. But he has what I want. He's had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. And if you start to look around with an open mind, you're going to find very few people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that have had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. You'll meet a lot of people that have had a major awakening and a life-changing alteration as a result of 1 through 9.5 or 9 3/4. I met a guy not too long ago from Orange County, California. He's 7 years sober, and he said he asked everyone he could find in Orange County 2 questions. Do you have a daily meditation practice? And have you finished all the amends you're consciously aware of up to today? And he couldn't find anyone. And he heard Mark's tape, and he got a hold of Mark, and that man has finished amends for the first time in his life, and he's on fire.
Tell him what's happened to him, though, in terms of other members.
He was rejected by his home group. They told him he should be drunk and that he had gone off and joined a cult. A group in Alcoholics Anonymous that only wants to try to do what's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is not popular. If you want to be popular and make a lot of friends, and don't carry the message from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Try to be popular if you want to be effective. So, if this book addresses me personally when I suffer from lack of power, it also addresses me when power has come into my life and I can begin to find out how to use it properly. My God, can you imagine going into a meeting where you can pick a topic, and you pick the topic, proper use of the will. We can exercise our willpower along these lines all we wish. My God, in some groups that would be like, they'd just string you up, right? What do you mean, proper use of your willpower? You can't trust your willpower? You can't trust your mind? You know? Well, I've recovered. Recovered? My God, the boy thinks he's cured. No, I'm not cured. It's a daily reprieve. I can live in a recovered state. On and on and on. So, if this book addresses me when I'm suffering from lack of power, and it addresses me when when I've begun to have a conscious contact with this power, then our friend Don Coyes was right when he said, if you're doing the work for the first time, enjoy it, because hopefully you will never do the work for the first time again. You know, when you're doing the work and you just get enough from the previous assignment to just do the next, right? You finish the first column. Keep praying. You don't even know how you're getting to work, but you're just able to do the second column. And then the third column. Well, I don't live suffering from lack of power anymore. I might suffer from untreated alcoholism and the resurgence of the ego, but I now come to the work using 10, 11, and 12 to do 1 through 9. Because Mark and I are not two people that have fell victim to the belief you do 1 through 9 once because of what our egos do. How do you use 10, 11, and 12 to do 1 through 9? You start to pray for an open mind and a new experience, and all of a sudden every new person you sit with and everyone you're sponsoring will reflect your first step to you. That's using 12. You'll see the unmanageability in all your affairs. Mark told me this last time through the work, that I should start the work where it meets me. And where it meets me at 20 years of sobriety is not a drink on my ass, and that's the problem. I don't think the unmanageability has anything to do with me drinking again. And I go to meetings and I talk about her and it and this and you and that and the unmanageability of my life, but I don't know that every piece of that unmanageability is a drink of alcohol waiting for me. So he had me look at the unmanageability using page 52, and I started to see it. And I start to experience this tension, this freedom. And then he asked me, now see how all of that you've seen is really a drink of alcohol. I use prayer. I use meditation. I use pausing, turning, asking, watching to show me my first step 20 years sober. Can you have an experience with alcohol, the truth about alcohol 20 years sober without having to take another drink? Yes, you can. You can experience the first step because it's not the knowledge that's going to keep me sober. I've had times where I can go and give a talk on 3 parts of the first step all day long, but the consciousness of the first step is not there. How do you know when the consciousness of the first step is not there? When you're stuck in amends and you can't move on. When you're stuck in inventory and the inventory doesn't have anything to do with drinking again. We lose the consciousness of our first step. You use 10, 11, and 12 to do 1 through 9. Mark and I have met a lot of people who say, I'm 10 years sober, I'm doing the steps again, and my sponsor told me to go home and start inventory. That's negating a lot of the power that the first 3 steps have to reveal things to you in step 4 that you're not aware of when you start the work. 1, 2, and 3 have a tremendous amount of power to reveal things that I don't know are there. I wish we had time to go word for word, but we don't this weekend. The greatest thing that I can share with you that I've learned over the years from my heroes, what can you do with the doctor's opinion? Remember, it's only his opinion. He didn't have this craving, but do I? That's the question. Do I experience this craving? Do I drink for the effect? Does this craving happen? what you can do with the doctor's opinion is turn every statement you possibly can into a question. This is a type of alcoholic I had regarded as hopeless. Am I? Page XXV. Even this guy, even the doctor, even Dr. Silkworth, who worked with thousands of alcoholics, at the bottom of the next paragraph, said, this man and over 100 appear to have recovered. Not that they were always recovering. Our friend Frank always says anyone who says they're recovering probably isn't. How it works, you hear in every meeting. Every meeting where they read how it works. You know, there's a line that you hear that you know, some people, myself included, I hear how it works so often I forget the simple fact that how it works actually means, how does that go again?
How it works.
How it works actually means how it works. Or there is a solution. Now, what could there is a solution possibly mean? Could it mean there is a solution? Right. But in how it works, there's a line, second line. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. So those that will tell you you can't recover are probably people who have never given themselves to this simple program. But those that have given themselves to this simple program, been honest and thorough from the very beginning, which they beg us to do, believe you can. Remember, we're dealing with alcohol. I've seen a lot of people drink again who didn't have the thought about drinking for a long time. You'll hear it. Oh, I'm not worried about alcohol. I haven't had the thought for 15 years. And then what did Mark say? What does the book say? Boom, suddenly, at once, abruptly, you know? Boom, there it was. Doctor's opinion. You turn statements into questions. Do I believe my body is as abnormal as my mind? Did it ever satisfy me to be told I couldn't control my drinking just because I was maladjusted? No, it didn't satisfy me. Do I believe this message must have depth and weight? Do I believe that? Or am I going to take a weak cup of coffee? They make a distinction between alcoholism and drug addiction. Find out your truth. Does the craving happen with alcohol? Does it happen with drugs? Which drugs? There's a difference between drug addiction and alcoholism. How do I know that? Because there are men and women in this room that are absolutely alcoholic who could take or leave drugs. They're not real addicts at all. And there are drug addicts in our program and other programs who could take or leave alcohol. Find your own truth. Some people are both. It only has to do, this whole section, from the doctor's opinion to the bottom of page 43, including page 44, they only want you to be convinced of two things, that they spend, 54 pages. 54 pages out of 164 to get across the two ideas that they leave you with on page 44. 4 lines from the top. If when you honestly want to, you can't stop drinking, if when you honestly want to, you can't quit entirely, which means stay stopped, and when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. Can I control it once I start? And can I keep myself stopped once I stop? So I go through the doctor's opinion and I turn statements into questions. I go through the first 8 pages of Bill's story and I mark what I can relate to. And I see my drunkalog. I see my thinking, the progression of thinking, the drinking, and the emotional, and the spiritual maladies surrounding all of his drunkalog. Then he has an awakening. Ebby comes to see him. This man Cersei that Mark talked about took care of Ebby the last few years of his life. And isn't it an interesting paradox for us to look at our own first step is that the man that carried the message to Bill Wilson never stayed sober very long. So much for the messenger, the message. Principles, Bill took the principles. What if he just felt so discouraged because of Ebby drinking again that he said, forget it, this isn't going to work, and forgot about that next man, Dr. Bob. You go through Bill's recovery, 9 to 16, mark anything you're not willing to do that he did to recover, and mark it and be honest, and then look at it when you think you're done with step 1. And if you're still wondering if you're done with step 1, you're not done with step 1. When there's no choice but to move on to step 2, and you're going to choose a conception that'll work from desperation rather than virtue, you'll be moved on to step 2. If you're still wondering, our friend Frank often says his sponsor was not the most tolerant man in the world. He sat with him one time and he turned to how it works, and his sponsor said, "How are you with this?" We admitted we were powerless over. No problem. But what about step 2? Well, that's where you are. If you don't know, you don't know. How do you know what you don't know? If you don't pray for an open mind. Take Bill's recovery and mark what you're not willing to do to recover. Then go from 17 to 23, because after the top of 23, and I'll show you how we turn the... Isn't it interesting? When they get done with the craving, they give you a summary question that sums up the only thing you need to be convinced of from the doctor's opinion to 23. Top of 23, turn it into a question. Does my experience, circle the word abundantly, not once or twice, abundantly. Does my experience with alcohol abundantly confirm what? That I am positive that once I put alcohol, whatever, into my system, something happens which makes it, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for me to stop. That's all you need to be thoroughly convinced of to go on from 23 to 43. From 23 to 43, so you can see that we're looking at the first step in 2 parts. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, bodily and mentally. There's 2 parts to powerless. And I have to say to you that on 44, it does not work if you believe or. If when you honestly want to, you can't quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount, you're probably alcoholic. Or is one of those places where some of the original members of AA that we knew in Denver, even one man from the Oxford group, he was a member of the Red Brigade of the Oxford group and came to AA, one of the first 100, Oscar Weiss, Gene Cooper, told us that this book was written by drunks for drunks, and that here and there they put what they call traps. Traps for somebody who's looking for a way out. Probably, maybe, rarely, and or. Or is one of them. I have worked with people diligently, from the doctor's opinion all the way up to we agnostic, just to help them experience 2 things. They can't control it once they start, and they can't keep themselves stopped when they stop. And they get to this and they say, see, it doesn't say you have to have both the obsession and the craving. It says or. Well, here's the problem. If you, every time you drink alcohol, you get a craving for more alcohol, but you don't get the obsession, make up your mind. Don't ever drink again, and that craving will never happen. Or you experience the mental obsession on a regular basis to drink alcohol, but when you drink alcohol, you don't get the craving. Hey, next time you get the obsession, just drink the way you want. It ain't or. You got to have both to be powerless. The catch there is I've never met an alcoholic who had the craving and didn't have the obsession. But what drives those? That's where we're at. You go from the doctor's opinion to page 43, and you see why you're powerless over alcohol. Why is my life unmanageable?
Turn to chapter 4, We Agnostics. And I'll give you a way. Visualizations work well for me, but there's a way that you can go through this chapter to let the second step meet you where you were. And so we've talked about the first step is the foundation of this spiritual art. So imagine that you're standing on this foundation, and there's 2 doors, and page 44 tells you the doors. Door 1 is doomed to an alcoholic death. Door 2, live in a spiritual basis. Now, based on your first step experience, that produces a willingness to open door 2. So let's say that we open door 2. And so you open the door and you step inside, and what you see is you see different individuals, a row of them, sitting at a table, and there's a chair in each table. And so you're going to walk up to the first table. Now this is what I right now I'm in my second step, and I'm going through this process. I'm in my 21st year. I've just finished my first step experience, or let me say it this way, it finished me. And I'll probably talk more about that. It was very profound to me in many ways. Came out of left field. It was amazing. So I sit down at the first chair, and that's on page 45 toward the bottom, and this man's going to say to me, here's what he's going to say to me. He said, Mark, does the word God bring up a particular idea of him that you currently have? And what I'm being asked in my second step is, what is my concept or my idea of God? And I had to answer that from where I am today. And then if you turn over to page 46, so imagine that you tell this person what your current concept of God is, correct? Your memory of that, your concept, your belief. And he's going to look at you, because you got to pass the test before you get past him and go to the next guy. And here's what it is in the middle paragraph on page 46. Mark, are you willing at 20 plus years of sobriety to lay aside your prejudice? Prejudice means preconceived thought or opinion. So it's my current belief system about God. Are you willing to lay aside prejudice, Mark, and express a willingness to believe in a power greater than yourself that can take you past right here, past your present concept? Are you willing to admit, Mark, and then here's why this man's going to ask me to do this, because, Mark, it is impossible for you to define or comprehend that power. So your current concept of that power is very limiting in nature. Are you willing to lay that aside, Mark? Let's say I say yes. He says fine. Now you get to sit across from the next guy in the second step. Here's what he says. Mark, you don't need to consider anyone else's concept of God. Your own concept, however inadequate, will be sufficient for you to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. And they introduced me maybe to a new concept. As soon as we admit the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things. See, some of you actually, I bet you believe that you chose to be with us this weekend. I assure you, none of us did. Many, many months ago, I got a phone call from Steve. Steve and Ralph had been listening to tapes of Joe. Or actually, Ralph had been listening to tapes of Joe and had given, I think, to Steve. And then somehow I came in there, and then Ralph gave them to Steve, but Steve didn't like me. So he didn't. I appreciate his honesty. I didn't like you, he said. Never met me, just this voice coming out of her. I don't like him. So, needless to say, here we are and here all you are, and none of us had a choice in this, because underlying the totality of things is a creative guiding intelligence. Are you willing to be open to that? Yeah, I am. Then you'll be possessed of a new, N-E-W, new sense of power and direction, provided you took up simple steps. You willing to do that, Mark? Yeah. Because God won't make hard terms with those who seek him, that course of action. Are you willing to seek God? Yeah. Good. Then I get to go on to the third chair. Here's the question the guy says to me. Mark, do you now believe you're willing to believe there's a power greater than yourself that you cannot define or comprehend that can take you past here, past your belief systems, past your concepts, into levels of consciousness you know nothing about? Yeah, I believe that. Then he assures me that I'm on my way, and I get to move past him. If you turn over to page 48, top of the page, this guy starts asking me some interesting questions. He said, Mark, in your 21st year without a drink of alcohol, where are you now handicapped by being obstinate, sensitive, and full of unreasoning prejudice? Ooh. Mark, are you so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things that are not in agreement with you make you bristle with antagonism? Ooh. This sort of thinking has to be abandoned. Are you willing to abandon it? Well, I believe so. And then it goes on. He said, well, let me remind you why you might want to. Faced with alcoholic destruction, he's got a glass of whiskey, You're going to get open-minded. Faced with alcoholic destruction, Mark, you better get as open-minded on spiritual matters as you tried to be in other questions. In this respect, alcohol was the great persuader. Alcohol beats me into a state of reasonableness. Alcohol or untreated alcoholism. Talks about on page 49, underneath the mature world life as we see it, there's an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence. Mark, then it says right there, my perverse streak comes to the surface. Do you have a perverse streak around that, Mark? Where are you at with that? Do you try and convince yourself and others this is not so? Mark, are you willing to regard yourself as an intelligent agent, spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation? Then the guy says, Mark, one other question. Are you willing, I'm going to beg you to lay aside prejudice. And then they talk about even against organized religions. Every man that I've ever worked with, I ask him this question. What prejudice do you currently have against organized religion? And I imagine a bunch of you have them in here. Well, it could be Mormons, or it could be Buddhist, or it could be this, or Christian, it could be. And they go on and explain why. And what they're trying to make me understand is that there's only one God and I'm not it. And who am I to make statements about that? And that what I might observe instead is that while I'm making judgments and separating myself from all these people, I might observe that they're leading a fairly decent life when in fact I don't know anything at all about that. And then I turn to page 50, and here's where this same man sits across from me, and based on my current experience, I've got to look at myself in AA and different groups, and he asked me this question. Mark, do you look at the human defects of these different groups, different dogmas, different philosophies? See, there's a lot of philosophies in AA about how to work the steps. There's a big movement of back to basics. You probably all heard of that. A lot of different ways. Some people write a 3-column inventory. Some people believe in do 1 through 9 one time, live in 10 and 11. There's a lot of different concepts out there. And at one time or another, I've had opinions on every one that didn't agree with the current one I was using. So have you, right? Did you use those shortcomings, Mark, as a basis for wholesale condemnation? Right? Bottom of the page, one of the most powerful paragraphs in the whole book. Promises that when I can come to believe in a power greater than myself, take a certain attitude toward that power. You might want to write page 55 in your book. To do certain simple things, there will be a revolutionary change in my way of living and thinking. That is an incredible second step promise. Revolutionary change in the way I live and think, my thought life. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of my human resources, I found a new power. New, there's that word new again. New power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into me. This happened soon after I wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. One of the things you're going to find out this weekend is there's a bunch of requirements we got to meet as we go through the steps. There's not just one. There's only one requirement to be a member, to occupy a chair. There's a whole bunch of requirements you got to meet if you want to go through these steps and surrender to this process.
Therein lies a question. Is the only requirement for membership the only requirement for me to stay sober? Is a desire to stop drinking enough to keep me sober?
So the same guy is sitting across from the chair on page 51. He has another question, Mark. He said, Mark, leaving aside the drink question, because I haven't had a drink in 20 years, is living unsatisfactory for you at times? Leaving aside the drink question, Mark, in your 20th year, is living unsatisfactory? Talks about, they show how a change come over them. They describe the change. The change is the consciousness of the presence of God, the most important fact of their lives. Then you turn over to page 52, the paragraph after the part that talks, I think, about the spirituality. When I saw others solve their problems, plural, by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, I had to stop doubting the power of God. My ideas don't work, but the God idea did. My ideas in my 20th year. Page 53. When I became an alcoholic, crushed by a self-imposed crisis. My self-imposed crisis today is my attachment to my concepts, ideas, and old experiences. says I cannot postpone or evade. I got to fearlessly face the proposition God is everything or he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is my choice to be? This is a question of totality. God is everything or God is nothing. Everything. Every part of my life situation. Am I willing to throw it all into that hat? Is God going to be everything or is God going to be nothing? What is my choice to be? Page 54. Mark, have you been a worshiper? Have you not worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and myself? You sit with that, you look at that. What are you worshiping right now? And then with a better motive, have you not beheld the sunset, sea, or a flower? A little bit further on, it talks about in one form or another, I've been living by faith in Little House. And then in page 55, here's where we're going to told where and how to find the power. If lack of power is our dilemma. Talks about us for deep down inside. Every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. This idea is obscured by calamity, pomp, worship of other things. Look at the calamity, pomp, and worship of other things that you have going currently on in your life, because that's what's blocking you from conscious contact. We finally saw a faith in some kind of a God was part of a makeup as just much as a feeling for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, so that's how you and I are going to experience God, by searching fearlessly. God is as much a fact as we were. The wave's a part of the ocean. The wave has all the properties of the ocean but can't be the ocean, and that is the way it is with you and I and God. I am a part of God, just as you are. I have all the properties of God, yet I'm not God, if that makes sense. All I do, all this work does, is wake me up to that fact, so that I'm no longer feeling separated, so that I'm feeling a part of, I'm waking up to that which already is. Joe and I are no closer to God today than we were in the middle of our last drunk, because there's no such thing as distance, because there's nothing but God. All that's happened is as a result of this work and continue to work with these disciplines is we're awake, aware, mindful, and conscious of that which was always present to us, because we're a part of that which is always present. But I'm blocked. I always laugh when people, I got to go find God. I'm sorry to hear that. Where isn't God?
Distance doesn't change. Perception changes.
Yeah, that's all I got. We've got to quit at 5 till, because he had 5 minutes on the table. When there's 5 minutes left,
Okay.
we got to stop.
Let me touch on a couple things. In a few places, they tell us the purpose of this book. Some people don't know the purpose. They think it's a novel you read to relate to. One of the purpose in one of the forwards, the forward to the first edition says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. In another place on page 20, it says to answer the question, what do I have to do for the alcoholic who wants to get over it? Another place it tells you is on page 45, to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. It's the main purpose of this book. Some questions. Page 30, 31. Did you try to prove to yourself you could drink like other people? Page 31. Could you drink and stop abruptly? 34, paragraph 1. Could you leave alcohol alone for 1 year? Page 44. If when you honestly want to, can you quit entirely? Same page. If when drinking, do you have little control over the amount? One of the most important questions from page 30. Have you conceded to your innermost self that you are alcoholic? Bodily, once I start to drink, I get a physical craving. Mentally, once I stop, I get a mental obsession. Spiritually, why is my life unmanageable? My life is unmanageable because of a spiritual malady. My book says we are not only bodily and mentally ill, we are spiritually sick, and when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Does the spiritual malady mean my spirit is sick? No. It means I'm shut off from it, and that's a horrible malady. To be shut off from your spirit. Don't a lot of you in this room believe that your alcohol and drug use was a spiritual search to solve a spiritual disconnection? Other questions to wrap up the first step. Here's some times we drink again with warnings. Page 14, if you fail to perfect and enlarge your spiritual life. Page 62, if you fail to be rid of yourself of selfishness and self-centeredness. Page 66, if you shut out the sunlight of the Spirit with resentment. Page 70, if you knowingly continue to harm others with sex. Another one, page 72, if you skip the fifth step. Page 78, if you allow the fear of our creditors to block you from facing them. Page 99, if you fail to immediately try to repair our damage to the family. Some other questions. Once again, can you control the amount once you start? Do you believe the physical craving would occur if you took a drink today? The mind could tell you, maybe after all these years and all that I know, I could get away with it. Maybe with what I've learned, the craving wouldn't happen. Maybe I wouldn't lose control. Maybe if I tried really hard with this mind, I wouldn't lose control. Do you believe you could take 2 drinks a day for 30 days? No more, no less. That was a test given to us by the first woman in Alcoholics Anonymous to stay sober, the founder of the National Council on Alcoholism, Marty Mann. Page 22, does your experience abundantly confirm that once you put alcohol into your system, something happens which makes it virtually impossible for you to stop? That's the summary of all the work you've done to look at the craving. Did you ever drink again when you didn't want to, even after swearing off drinking forever? Page 34. Do you believe that self-knowledge, personal knowledge, is of no use with respect to your drinking? 37. Page 39. Do you believe that you will be unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge? Page 24. Do you believe you have lost the power of choice? Do you believe you have 2 alternatives now, to live on a spiritual basis or die an alcoholic death? So those are some of the questions. It's always helpful in step 2 to look at Bill's experience with Ebby on page 12, how he came to believe. Remember, the top of 23 is the last place where you need to be convinced about the craving. They sum it all up. Page 43 is where they'll sum up the obsession. 44 and 45 and 52, we'll come back and start step 2 from there. And what time do we have?
See you in a half hour. What time is it?
What time is it?
10:30, so 11. My name's Mark. I'm an alcoholic. A couple more readings from the book by Anthony DeMello on awareness. The first is called Labels. This is helpful when thinking really about inventory. It says the important thing is not to know who I is or what I is. You'll never succeed. There's no words for it. The important thing is to drop the labels. As the Japanese Zen masters say, don't seek the truth, just drop your opinions. Drop your theories. Don't seek the truth. Truth is not something you search for. If you stop being opinionated, you would know. Something similar happens here. If you drop your labels, you would know. What do I mean by labels? Every label you can conceive of except perhaps that of human being. I am a human being, fair enough. Doesn't say very much. But when you say I am successful, that's crazy. Success is not part of the I. Success is something that comes and goes. It could be here today and gone tomorrow. That's not I. When you said I was a success, you were in error. You were plunged into darkness. You identified yourself as success. The same thing when you said I'm a failure, a lawyer, a businessman. You know what's going to happen to you if you identify yourself with those things? You're going to cling to them. You're going to be worried they might fall apart, and that's where all your suffering comes in. That's what I meant earlier when I said to you, if you're suffering, you're asleep. Do you want a sign that you're asleep? Here it is. Where are you suffering? Suffering is a sign you're out of touch with the truth. Suffering is given to you, you might open your eyes to the truth, that you might understand there's falsehood somewhere. Just as physical pain is given to you so you understand there's a disease or illness somewhere. Suffering points out there's falsehood somewhere. Suffering occurs when you clash with reality. When your illusions clash with reality, when your falsehoods clash with truth, then you have suffering. Otherwise, there is no suffering. This has to do with, we're going to be moving into the third step, so this has to do with God and power. It says ideas actually fragment the vision, intuition, or experience of reality as a whole. This is what the mystics are perpetually telling us. Words cannot give us reality. They will only point, they will only indicate. You use them as pointers to get to reality. But once you get there, your concepts are useless. A Hindu priest once had a dispute with a philosopher who claimed the final barrier to God was the word God, the concept of God. The priest was quite shocked by this, but the philosopher said, "The ass that you mount and that you use to travel to a house is not the means by which you enter the house. You use the concept to get there. Then you dismount, you go beyond it. You don't need to be a mystic to understand that reality is something that can't be captured by words or concepts. To know reality, you have to know beyond knowing." Spent way too many years putting God in little boxes. If you think about it, what ultimately I think happens to us through the process of the steps is that we must experience the power behind the name. I don't know as if the name makes much difference. It doesn't to me, it may to you. I'm a lot more concerned about experiencing the power that is behind the name. Chapter 5 and how it works. Going to move into the third step. Talking to a gentleman on the break, and I think this is important. People who get hung up in the second step get hung up because they're trying to define or comprehend God. You do that long enough, they'll lock you up in an institution. I mean, God is beyond comprehension. God is beyond... Matter of fact, there's a line in the big book, God as I understand God, and I don't understand God. I have a very limited, finite mind. How can my mind understand God? There's a part of me that is a part of God that doesn't have to understand God because it's already a part of God. Meditation allows me to experience that part of it. Matter of fact, very seldom do I pay any attention to anything my mind tells me about God, because it's about my concepts and beliefs and things that have been fostered in me. I mean, I was raised a Methodist, became a Catholic to marry this girl who said I had to become a Catholic if I wanted what she had. I'm willing to go to any lengths, including a year of instruction. That was a neat deal. I was actively drinking then. I got to go in and do confession. I was free of all my sins. I could start all over. I thought that was a neat deal. Missed the whole point, to say the least. Over the years, when I think of my second step really experiences or concepts, studied a couple years with a medicine man, Native American spirituality. Did quite a bit with Catholicism, Christian mysticism, Buddhism, some of the Eastern philosophies. I get taken to these experiences. I don't have much say in it. They were all incredible. If you said to me today, do I have a concept of God, I have to say no. There's a story I read that really speaks to me about the God issue. Imagine that you knew the program, and imagine that you're a fish and we're swimming in water. And so you and another new guy, this elder swims by you, and this elder says, "It's really a beautiful day and the water's wonderful, isn't it?" And you're the new guy, and you turn to your other buddy who's new, and you say, "Yeah, it really is." And the elder swims by, and you turn to your buddy, and you said, "What does he mean by water? We got to go find this water. He seems to think that water's a neat thing." And that's kind of where I am with God. I'm immersed in God. It's beyond anything I can comprehend and understand. The only thing that for me is important is to know that I'm immersed in it. That's really all that's important. And I stay immersed in it through the disciplines of the 10th and 11th step. So we went through a series of doors in the second step. The last door, the last man who talked to us said to us, "Are you willing to seek?" If you turn to page 57. What is this but a miracle of healing, yet the elements are simple. Circumstances, my first step, made me willing to believe. I humbly offer myself to my Maker, and then I knew. It's interesting to take you from belief to knowing. It's one thing to believe in God, it's another to know God. Even so, God can restore us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but God will come to all who've honestly sought God. So the last question the man is asking me in my second step is, are you willing to seek God? If I answer yes to that, the promise is, well, good, then Mark, in your seeking, when you draw near to God, God will disclose himself to you. We want to define how God discloses God to us. You might want to get rid of that. So we finished the second step. Now you got 2 more doors. Doomed to die an alcoholic death, or make a decision to turn your will and life over to the care of God, a God that you cannot define or comprehend. So I opened the door, and I got a bunch of guys sitting in chairs again. Here we go. I just think I'm getting through with something, and I got more. First man, first chair. Rarely have I seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. This guy likes to ask me questions like, Mark, do you understand what thoroughly means? It's stuff that insults my intelligence. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. In all the time that I've been around, I have met 2 cannots. I've met hundreds of will nots. It's a decision each and every one of us in this room has to make, and I believe that it gets made based on the pain and suffering we're experiencing and based on our first step experience. You're the only one who's going to decide if you're willing to give yourself completely to this program. It says they're usually men and women who are constitutionally capable of being honest with themselves. First step. The truth. They're unfortunate, they're not at fault, they're born that way. They're incapable of grasping, developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. Well, they still have a chance. Then there are those 2 who suffer from grave emotional, mental disorders. Many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. I was in the program several years before I realized they were talking about me as well as you. Here's another experience I've had. The more self-centered you are, the more grave emotional, mental disorders you're going to experience. Think about that. Go into your own experience. I don't know what it is, but when you turn in on yourself and you're preoccupied with yourself, my experience is it brings about grave emotional, mental disorders because everything's about you. Alcoholics, how many of you read the book The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz? A couple of you raised your hands. Well, there's 4 agreements he asks you to make that will change and revolutionize your life. One of them is be impeccable with your word. The big book talks about that. It says, this manner of living demands rigorous honesty. Example, if I tell you I'm going to call at 8 and I call at 8:05, it's not that I called you late, it's that I'm a liar. I am not impeccable with my word. And you start looking at honesty at that degree and that level. The second thing, though, is don't take things personal. Very, very difficult for alcoholics. And when I'm reading this book, and here's what this guy says. He said, Mark, let me explain to you the reason why you take things personal. Because you are selfish and you think everything is about you. Oh, no. He's read the big book. See? He's read the big book. The point I'm trying to make is that the more you are self-centered, the more you're going to suffer, the more you're going to experience mental and emotional disorders. Our stories disclose in general way what used to be like, what happened to us, what we're like now. Now, if you've decided you want what we have, and the book spent some time talking about what these people have, power, peace, happiness, sense of direction, etc., and you're willing to go to any length to get it, and we have some idea what that looks like, now you're ready to take certain steps. Some of these we're going to balk. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, and Joe summed it up. The steps are the easier, softer way. It says, but we could not. So with all the earnestness of our command, we beg of you, be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried on to our old ideas, and the results nil till we let go absolutely. So again, let's bring you all current, regardless of length of time in the program. What old ideas do you currently have right now that you're up against? That's now the noose around your neck. Your memory of your old experience of how it was, your memory of your experience with God. Joe calls them new old ideas. It says the result's going to be nil until we let go of them absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, alcohol is too much for us. But there is one who has all power, and that one is God. So if God has all power, how much do you have? Strange thing is power starts to come in from powerlessness. The extent to which you think you have power is the extent to which you will not experience power. God cannot fill a full cup. God fills an empty cup. See, that's a paradox, isn't it? The powerlessness of the first step opens me up to receiving power. Here's a strong warning. Have measures availed us nothing. Boy, we know about that, right? 9 1/4 amends, 9 1/2 amends, 9 3/4 amends. Right? Little bit of work with meditation.
Shouldn't half avail us half?
Yeah, shouldn't half avail us half, he says. We stand at the turning point. Here's the turning point. I'm either going to turn and go through the rest of the steps, or I'm going to go back to my first step. So here's a prayer. God, we ask your protection, care with complete abandon. Why? Because you're going to make a decision in the third step, and to quote Big Frank, you're going into hell in the fourth step. And you're going to look at yourself. We need protection and care to this place we're going to get taken to. We're going to write these inventories and do a very, very thorough self-examination, and the ego balks upon investigation. And then we're going to have to read that with somebody, a tremendous leveling of pride. Then we're going to have to take all of those defects that we identified to this power. 7-step, given to the power. 8-step, make a list of all the people we've harmed as a result of living our life on self-will. And in the 9th, take the course of action to make those amends. That's why we need protection and care. And it uses the word complete abandon. Abandon means give up completely. You're jumping off a cliff. You don't have any idea what's below.